let's look at some research on grit, shall we? Angela Duckworth is probably the foremost grit expert. I highly recommend her book if you'd like to check that out. But there's some people that kind of, when she came out with her book, there's some people that doubted it, and kind of like, well, I'm going to poke some holes in this. And that's what people do, right? And then some people said, you know what, let's dive into this, right? Let's actually do some robust research and let's see what we find. By the way, her book is Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. I want to give that the full, because it's a fabulous book. It's a must read. So research was done on 11,000 plus military cadets at West Point, the United States Military Academy. And it was over a 4-year period. So this is no Johnny-come-lately sample size. You're talking about 11,000 cadets over a 4-year period at the United States Military Academy. And it was the idea of, how does grit play into their academic success? Because after all, they are there to be trained to become officers in the United States Army. Okay. So they came to it and they were looking at grit's importance, and they did it by measuring 3 attributes. The cadet's cognitive ability. This is the ability to reason, to plan, to solve problems, to think abstractly, to comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly, right? So your basic cognitive skill sets. Then they looked at the physical ability, their speed, their strength, in other words, their physical capabilities. And then they looked at grit, and the way they defined it, they took, Angela Duckworth's definition, passion and perseverance for long-term goals of personal significance. Okay. The research was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, for those of you that want to dig into this some more. And so here's what they found. They found that when cadets completed a 12-point test known as the grit scale in their first week of training, they saw that the cadets' data on initiation, starting something, completion, graduation, and grade point averages were all affected, and even their physical performance, obviously, were affected by grit. And so they came away with, exactly what Angela Duckworth asserted, that grit enables us to keep performing when the going gets tough. Okay. And so they walked away, and the message is clear. The environment and experience you have as a child plays a lot into how much grit you have. More on that in a second. Also, that talent is not enough. Talent's not enough. That someone with talent, high levels of talent, but low levels of grit, they're not going to have as much of a chance of success. Why? Either complete frustration, which causes them to quit, or distraction, which causes them to quit, right? Because when you hit hurdles in life, obstacles in life, it either turns into distraction or frustration, And these are just different levels of emotion, that just from my own life. When I run into a challenge, if I don't have the right amount of grit, I'm going to either get distracted because I go, well, this seems to be a little bit too difficult. There's probably something else over here that, shiny object, and then boom, I go over here, right? Or I get real levels of frustration and say, I can't do this, I'm done, right? Which is probably what happens to me most of the time on the golf course, right? So that then asks the question, or it presents a question: if I don't have enough grit, or a child does not have enough grit, can grit be developed? In other words, can a person build that muscle of grit with intentionality? And then, can a parent, can a coach, can a teacher, can they promote the development of grit? I think it's an interesting question and an important question. Now, back to what we know in the findings, that a child, their childhood and adolescence, the environment, so what was life like in the home, okay? So that's their environment. Parents, the voices, that's environment. And then what were their experience? Sporting teams, school, where they're living their life outside of their core environment of the home, that's experience. So environment and experience obviously has a huge impact on how much grit you have. So in other words, we see from lots of data, I've read this recently, that dyslexic children become very resilient adults. You could fill in the blank there. You know, kids that come up in an abusive home, if they can weather it long enough to get healthy, on the other side of it, tremendous resilience many times as adults. That's not a silver bullet here. But the idea is that anyone who survives hardship has the elements of grit, has enough grit to thrive. Because it is in the surviving that you develop what you need to be thriving. And that is persistence, perseverance. I'm not going to quit. You can't keep a good man down. Things like that, right? So I did some more research. I'm just going to give this to you really quick. Here's how you can develop grit, or how your kid can develop grit, or how your student can develop grit, or how the player on your team leaders can develop grit, and of course, how we can develop grit. Because I think there is a combination of 4 things that, think of it as a greenhouse. You do these 4 things, and the greenhouse has the right environment for a plant to grow healthy. And if you want to grow your grit, I think there's 4 things you do. 1 is you got to love. 2, you got to try. 3, you got to prove. And 4, you got to believe. Let me break those down really quickly. You got to love. There has got to be a love of something, a passion. A passion. Like it's almost painful because you love it so much you are willing to endure pain. Every parent knows what I'm talking about. You will go through pain to protect your kid. You will go through pain to protect your spouse, right? Anybody who gets serious about working out, or if you ever had an injury and you had to do physical therapy, let me tell you something. You better have some passion to get back out on the court. You see these NFL athletes recover quickly. You look at Aaron Rodgers. This guy, 39 this last year. Great example. Blows his Achilles tendon. First game. And the guy's 39. He's ancient for the NFL. What happens? He's almost ready to go at the end of the year. In fact, you can make the case that he would have played if the Jets made the playoffs. What's going on there? Yes, he's got some physical abilities. Yes, maybe he heals quickly, but there's also an enormous amount of grit, and it came from passion. That dude wants to keep playing football. He doesn't need to make another cent the rest of his life. He's got crazy money. Why did Aaron Rodgers work so hard in physical therapy to recover so quickly? This is the reason. You got to have love. He loves the game. 2, you got to try. Once Aaron Rodgers knows I love the game and I gotta try, I gotta get after it in physical therapy. 3, you gotta prove. You gotta prove it. At some point after the trying, this is all the practice. So grit's developed through, I love this idea, I want to be this, I want to do this, and now I'm going to try it. And I'm going to try it long enough, and I'm going to practice long enough that I'm going to prove that I can do it to myself and others, and then finally got to believe. This is hope. If I stay with it and I keep proving it, it's going to happen. Got to love, you got to try, you got to prove it, you got to believe that it's worth it. You have those 4 elements, and you have developed a stew that will give you a ton of grit and make you truly unstoppable. Think about it. Grow your grit. That's how you do it.